Well, good afternoon. We all know that this virus has taken a terrible toll. Countless lives lost, families separated, people feeling isolated, and the job numbers we saw this morning are difficult to accept. These numbers are a punch in the gut. The unthinkable is happening. Ontario lost at least 400,000 jobs last month due to the fallout of this terrible virus. That's 400,000 people unemployed. That's 400,000 paychecks lost. That's 400,000 families finding it harder to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. And across the country, over 1 million people and tens of millions more around the world. Sadly, these numbers are just the tip of the iceberg. They're just a snapshot of what we're dealing with. But these aren't just numbers. These are real people. People who are struggling out there. And it breaks my heart. It keeps me up at night. But fighting for these people, fighting for each of you, is also what keeps me going as a province, as a people. We've had to make unthinkable sacrifices. We've paid a tremendous price in this fight. We know that this fight is a matter of life and death. And when I look at the modeling, when I look at the numbers, and I see that tens of thousands of lives are at stake, and when I see that our actions so far, our efforts together to slow the spread, have saved tens of thousands of lives, I know that we're doing the right thing. Right now, we're in the middle of a public health crisis. We're in the thick of the fight against this virus. But we're also dealing with an economic crisis. We're dealing with a massive economic fallout. The unthinkable financial hardships that people and families are facing. And that sad reality is we're still in the thick of it. And we must consider that things could get worse before they get better. That's why we're doing everything in our power to support Ontario families and businesses right now. I've said before that we will spare no expense. We will leave nothing on the table when it comes to supporting Ontario through these dark days. Our government has already allocated $17 billion as part of our plan to help us get through the next little while. We've set up $52 million in emergency assistance through Ontario Works to help those who may not qualify for the federal programs. This will help those who need it with groceries and other necessities. We're giving families a break on their electricity bills. We're giving every family in Ontario $200 per child and $250 per child with special needs. In these darkest days, I want you to know that we're here for the people of Ontario. And in Ontario, we're looking out for each other. We have each other's backs, because that's what Ontarians do. They exemplify the Ontario spirit every day. People are lending a helping hand. People are donating to charities and churches and doing what they can to support each other. And that's the spirit, the Ontario spirit, is what will get us through this. Because the sooner we defeat the virus, the sooner we can start rebuilding the economy and getting people back to work. We aren't there yet, but we will be. And while we weather this storm, we must also plan for what's on the other side of these dark clouds. We must be ready when the time comes to reopen our economy, to get Ontario back to work. That's why today we're launching the Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee. This committee will chart a path for Ontario's economic recovery. So when we beat COVID-19, our province can come back stronger than ever before, and Ontario will take our rightful place as the workshop of Canada, the economic powerhouse of Confederation. My friends, there's a lot of work to be done, and we will still have some very difficult days and weeks ahead of us. And I know that it might be hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel right now, but we will turn the corner. We will get back on our feet, and we will once again be the economic engine of Canada. It is my mission to get every corner of this province back on track and back to work, from Wawa to Wallaceburg, from London to Lindsay, from Ottawa to Orillia, from North Bay to Niagara Falls, and everywhere in between. We will light the match that ignites a fire under the economy, a fire like we have never seen before. Ontario will create a wave of economic growth not seen in decades, and we will come back stronger and more united than ever before. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. I'll pass it over to my Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's jobs numbers underscore the significant impact of COVID-19, and they do serve as a stark reminder that behind every economic statistic is a family, a worker, a business owner. Over the last few weeks, people and businesses have done their part to contain the virus, and I know our province will continue to do whatever it takes to fight this global pandemic. But as we've all seen, and is highlighted today, the impacts of following the public health advice comes at a cost. And the reality is that this remains a rapidly evolving situation. To use a hockey analogy, we don't know for certain if this is the first period or it's the third period. But what I am certain about is that people need relief, and they need it now. That's why we introduced Ontario's action plan responding to COVID-19 last month. It outlined the first steps of our government's immediate response, including $17 billion of additional healthcare resources and urgent supports for people and jobs. The plan also offered $10 billion in cash flow support for people and businesses through tax and other deferrals. My colleagues and I have been working with our federal counterparts to ensure their response provides the relief that Ontario people need and businesses need desperately. And we've been in touch with the Federal Minister of Finance, Bill Morneau, nearly every day. I do want to repeat that I'm grateful to the federal government for being receptive to our advice, and I applaud them for their significant response thus far. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak to members of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce who emphasized, as many have, that they can't wait for relief. They need it immediately. And I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage all of the political parties at the federal level to work together to ensure that the relief gets to people and businesses as quickly as possible. The cooperation between the government and the opposition here in Ontario serves as a model of collaboration in times of crisis. Now, as the Premier said, while we continue to work together to provide resources for healthcare professionals and relief to people and businesses, today's job numbers remind us we also need to plan for the recovery. At Premier Ford's request, I've convened the Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee. In addition to Minister Elliott, this group is comprised of my cabinet colleagues who share economic responsibilities and represent every sector of Ontario's economy. Thank you to each of the following members who've agreed to be part of this important committee. Vic Fideli, our Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, Peter Bethlenfalvy, the President of the Treasury Board, Caroline Mulrooney, the Minister of Transportation, Christine Elliott, our Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, Ernie Hardeman, the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Greg Rickford, the Minister of Energy, Northern Development, Mines and Indigenous Affairs, John Yakubuski, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, Laurie Scott, Minister of Infrastructure, Lisa MacLeod, Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, Lisa Thompson, the Minister of Government and Consumer Services, Monty McNaughton, the Minister of Labour, Training and Skills Development, and Prabmeet Sarkaria, the Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. Now, direct outreach to business and organizations and individuals has been undertaken by this team in recent weeks, and it will be critical to inform our planning. And our first order of business is to prepare for the recovery phase of Ontario's action plan, which will begin as soon as COVID-19 is contained. The people behind the 403,000 jobs lost last month are the people who will be on our minds while we do this work. This team will work together to get our economy moving again, with a focus on job creation, opportunities for growth, and protecting our province from future threats. The committee will work with a broad range of stakeholders, including continuing the Team Ontario approach that Premier Fode has spoken about, to take the necessary strategic steps to prepare and then execute the reopening of our economy. This means providing advice to plan the sequence we'll follow to remove restrictions, understand how key stakeholders are impacted, and deploy the government's resources to provide the right support to people and sectors who've been hurt by COVID-19. The timing of the recovery phase will be informed by the advice of medical experts and the best practices from other jurisdictions hit by COVID-19 earlier than Ontario. We will also look for advice from a wide range of economists, business leaders, labour leaders, members of civil society, not-for-profits, and most importantly, we will look to workers, families, and entrepreneurs who are struggling because of COVID-19. Their experience will ensure our government's actions get them back on their feet. By starting this work early, acting decisively, and working together, we know that Ontario will recover stronger. We will build on the critical first steps our government has taken. We will build on the province's strong economic fundamentals, and we will build on our partnerships with other levels of governments and the private sector. I want to conclude by reminding everyone to continue to follow the advice of our public health officials. The sooner we contain this outbreak, the sooner our economy will recover. Thank you very much to everyone who is doing their part. I was confident in Ontario's economic future before COVID-19, and I remain confident today. I'll now turn it over to Minister Bethlenfalvy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rod. As our government has said and demonstrated, we know that we must deal with the health crisis before we can address economic recovery. There is nothing more important than protecting the health and safety of the people of Ontario. And for our government, right now, that is job number one. But we can't stop there. As the Minister said, we cannot lose sight of the bigger picture. While managing and defeating COVID-19 is our top priority today, and will be for as long as necessary, we are also considering the future. Specifically, how we position Ontario to emerge from this crisis, and what the future looks like for our province. We have seen jurisdictions across this country and around the world begin to turn their attention to what the path forward looks like. And that is precisely what the Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee will be tasked with. Through this committee, we will ensure that once we are on our road to recovery, we are positioned to support economic growth and job creation across Ontario, so that families, businesses, and workers have the certainty and support they need to prosper once again. We will carefully watch what measures other jurisdictions are taking and when to consider how we can apply these best practices to Ontario. It means that we will have a long-term strategic vision ready for our economic recovery. And I must stress that this is an imperative we begin this work right now, because we must be ready with a plan for Ontarians, so that when this pandemic is over, and it will be over, that we are in the best possible position to restore Ontario's economy and build a brighter future together. This is about protecting livelihoods and lives. And to protect lives, it has been necessary to impose measures that encourage people to stay home and observe physical distancing. And these measures are protecting the people of Ontario. Unfortunately, they have come at the cost of some people's livelihoods. And I understand, I understand the hardship that entails. So we have introduced a variety of programs that offer immediate relief for those affected by the actions taken to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Because the most important action we can take is to ensure a recovery is the defeat of COVID-19. And that is what we are doing. But the choices we make now will determine the strength of our recovery later. The committee will work to gauge, interpret, and act on a dynamic and rapidly evolving situation to make those choices. By starting this work early, acting decisively, and working with our partners in other levels of government and the private sector, we will ensure that the province is best positioned to lead the recovery. And make no mistake, when the time comes, we will be ready. The COVID-19 virus is a generation-defining challenge, and we know that many of you are taking the right steps to fight COVID-19, and we understand the many sacrifices many of you are making. Rest assured, as the Premier, the Deputy Premier, and the Minister of Finance have said, we will do whatever it is necessary to get through this and onto a path to recovery, to protect lives and livelihoods. Because once we beat this, and we will beat this, it's only a matter of time, we will be ready to emerge stronger and more prosperous than ever before. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the phone line for questions. First question.
First question comes from Rob Ferguson from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, Premier. I'm wondering, after what you said yesterday about the concerns about testing, why you didn't speak up sooner. It's been several days since that the capacity has not been fully used, and I'm wondering what other elements of the COVID response you're not happy with, and which public service agencies are responsible.
Well, Rob, there's no doubt I was frustrated. I want to make it very clear. I'm not frustrated at any individual or any group. I'm frustrated at the system, and anyone that's ever worked in government understands the system. Rob, I was elected to come down here and change the system, and we've made tremendous changes. But when crises happen, you see where a lot of systems are broken down, or systems that there hasn't been a playbook to get through a crisis like this. And I understand that. I believe in our people. I believe in the Ontario public service, every single person. But we're going to get through it, and we're going to have better systems moving forward. And unfortunately, it takes a crisis to see where a lot of areas have been broken throughout government and in the private sector too. You really see the systems that work and don't work. So by no means, Rob, am I upset at absolutely anyone. Everyone's working their backs off. You get frustrated with the system. We're changing the system. We're going to make it better, and we're going to move forward, and more people will get tested.
Just as a follow-up, are there any things you wish that had been done differently or sooner? I noticed that we broke the story that the Dr. David McCune has been brought in, and it looks like Peter Donnelly is stepping aside at Public Health Ontario for medical reasons. But
yeah, well, that's
so
medical
how can you explain
reasons.
all these two?
I think, Rob, I think that Dr. Donnelly's an absolute champion. He's amazing, and unfortunately, he has to step aside for medical reasons. But I can't wait to have Dr. Donnelly back and have him part of the team. You want to talk about champions? He's a true champion.
Next question.
Next question comes from Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Hi, Premier.
Hi, Laura.
We saw the updated guidelines released today for high-priority individuals such as healthcare workers and long-term care residents for testing. Although the categories are broadened out for these individuals, it does not say, as you hammered home yesterday, that everyone in the healthcare sector and everyone in long-term care facilities should be tested for COVID-19. So are the updated guidelines good enough for you, and why don't you give doctors the discretion to test whoever they want to if they are concerned?
Well, again, depending on the testing, we're relying on our health experts, and we're putting in better systems that we can test more people, get results quicker. And with any crisis, Laura, you have to have the flexibility to adjust. As the numbers change, you can adjust the systems. But our goal at the end of the day is test every single frontline healthcare workers, all workers, being nurses, doctors, PSWs, cleaners, anyone that's involved in the healthcare system. But there has to be a priority. Our priority is make sure that we target the long-term care residents and the workers there, and then as well as seniors. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can for our seniors population. And as we move forward, you know, if we have to tweak a system, that's the right thing to do, then tweak the system, as long as we're seeing the results and we get more people tested. But simultaneously, as I mentioned yesterday, Laura, this system has to work not just for the first responders, healthcare workers, and so on and so forth. We have to make sure that we continue testing the general population. If someone has symptoms and they come in, we need to test them. And that's the point we need to get to, and I know we're going to be moving rapidly on this. So again, I just want to reinforce this. I have all the confidence in the world in our health team, what they're doing, and we're going to tweak the system and just speed things up.
Okay, thank you. And just on another topic, we reported today about Ottawa having a very comprehensive pandemic preparedness plan in place, which goes back many years. But much of what the federal government said it must do, like have enough medical equipment stockpiled, has fallen short. So I'm just wondering what your view of that has been, given how, you know, Ontario has spoken out about the PPE shortage. Should Ottawa have had more medical equipment stockpiled and been more prepared for this scenario?
No, I hear you, Laura, but there's no way I'm going to point the finger at any level of government or the feds. They've been great. Have we learned? Yeah, absolutely. And going back maybe a week ago or so, I know Ontario will never be put in this position again, relying on foreign governments to give us PPE items. We're ramping up, and companies are stepping up, and I'm just so impressed on you know, the private sector in Ontario, and they're stepping up in all areas. We're getting great news about the ventilators. Hopefully we'll be able to share more news tomorrow about them, and hopefully in the next day or two go and pick up the first few ventilators, along with the masks that we picked up the other day, and the gowns and the shields. You know, when we had the call for help, man, people responded. I'm so proud of the people of Ontario. Just like yesterday, over 8,000 when we asked for more healthcare workers, over 8,000 in less than 24 hours applied. What more can you ask for? We have the greatest province, the greatest people, the brightest people in the entire world. And that's why I'm so confident when we get through this, we're going to get the economy going. We're going to just light that match and ignite a fire, the likes of which this province has never seen before. And we did it once before, not in not in this situation. But I'll tell you, when we came to office, it was a big financial mess, and 300,000 people lost their jobs. Just keep in mind, it was right before this pandemic hit. We were reaching out everywhere around the world because we were short about 250,000 people to fill the jobs, and our economy was booming. We were per capita leading North America in job creation and economic development. I am so confident in the people of Ontario that we can unleash businesses and people, and they're just going to thrive once again, and we will get there.
Next question.
Next question comes from Cynthia Mulligan from City News. Please go ahead.
Hello, Premier.
Hi, Cynthia.
I've been speaking to a woman this morning who has a 9-year-old boy with severe autism. And they went to Florida before March break, and a couple weeks later, he became very, very ill. She took him to the hospital, and the doctors refused to give him a test because they said that he was too difficult. And at the same time, she's received a letter from a nursing home where her 90-year-old grandmother is, encouraging people to rethink sending, if their relative gets sick, sending them to the hospital for treatment. She's very concerned that vulnerable people, the elderly, people with disabilities, people like her son with autism, will not get the same level of care, will not be treated the same and get the same access. What do you have to say to her?
Well, first, my heart breaks to hear this story. I believe the story. I would like to follow up and just find out what hospital and who said this to her, because that will not happen. It should not happen and will not happen. And we want to make sure that we take care of people when they come to the hospital, that they have the best service possible. They should be tested. And again, I'd like to follow up offline with you if I could, Cynthia, and maybe get this person's phone number and give her a phone call personally, because that's not right. And anyone that goes to the hospital should be taken care of.
And just as part of that question, I've got another one for you, but what about elderly in nursing homes? Should nursing homes be telling people to consider keeping their loved ones in the nursing home and not sending them to hospital for treatment?
Well, again, it depends on the nursing home, if they're filled to capacity. I don't know the whole story, so it's hard to comment based on the story, but no one should be refused at a nursing home. If there's beds, they should be able to take the elderly in. It's absolutely critical that the door is wide open when people come there with their parents, grandparents, but that should be wide open. And I'll sit down, I'll be talking to the Minister of Seniors, and we'll address that. But if you have the numbers, by all means, I'll make the personal call, Cynthia.
Next question.
Next question comes from Allison Jones from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Hi, my question is for Minister Phillips. On auto insurance, since so many Ontarians are following the advice to stay at home, not driving as much, if at all, we've seen some insurance companies start to offer some types of breaks to customers on their auto insurance. Wondering if there's anything you are doing or can be doing to try and get something in place across the board.
Allison, I appreciate the question. Last week I had the CEOs of the major insurance companies as well as their association together to talk about this very issue. And the point I made to all of them, and I appreciated their openness in getting together and discussing this, but the point I made to all of them was that we are in unprecedented times, and there's unprecedented pressure on Ontario families, and of course that includes drivers, and that their response needed to reflect those those times, and that we would do what we need to do from a regulatory point of view to get out of the way. And so I have seen, as you mentioned, some good movement. I see Allstate talking about refunds, and so I'm looking forward to seeing fully what it is that the auto insurance sector does. Like a lot of people, I'm waiting for some details. I've learned to read the small print when it comes to auto insurance, but I think the initial response has to be one that reflects the challenges people are facing and the reality, which I hear all the time from my riding in Ajax and from people around the province, that people just aren't driving as much. There obviously are fewer accidents. So I look forward to seeing and understanding the details of the response, and I'll look forward to responding more to the question when they've given us some more detail.
But do you think that they should be doing more perhaps proactively instead of leaving the onus on customers to call in and try and plead their case, essentially?
Yeah, I do think that they should be proactive, and we're seeing some initial signs of that but again, they are just this week, a couple of the companies, Intact as well, have initially put out their responses to their customers. I reminded these CEOs, as I do with all business people, that the people who they're dealing with now have been their customers for the last 5 years, and they'll probably be their customers for the next 5 years. So it's very important, and we're all going to remember how people were treated. But obviously, the government will watch, and I will watch their response. I think it does need to be proactive, and it needs to reflect the really devastating impact that many people are feeling right now, and the fact and reality that many people are not using their vehicles. So I will wait and see, but as I said, we will happy to comment on it more once they've released all the details.
Next question.
Next question comes from Colin DeMello from CTV News. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, Premier. It looks like the Canada Emergency Response Benefit isn't actually going to benefit everyone affected by COVID-19. There are growing calls, including from prominent Conservatives, for a universal emergency basic income with clawbacks at tax time. Just wondering what you think. Do you think Ontarians would be better served with a basic income rather than the CERB?
Well, you know something, the basic income trial that the previous government did, I didn't believe in it. I just didn't. There's so many other tools that we can support people with, and you know that's what we're doing by working collaboratively with the federal government on their stimulus package and making sure we don't duplicate in our stimulus package what they've done. So to answer your question straight up, I don't believe in that. I believe in other areas that we can support people.
Okay, and just on another topic, you said yesterday that you wanted to test the general public and healthcare workers concurrently for COVID-19. So just wanted to know from you, if anyone listening or watching right now, if they wanted to go to an assessment center and get tested today, can you guarantee that they will not be turned away, and anyone who wants a test for COVID-19 will get a test as of today?
Yes, if they have symptoms, they should be tested. I agree, and you know, just looking down the street, some of the assessment centers, for one reason or another, the volume hasn't been there, and I think if they go in, they should be able to get tested. And again, we want to test as many people as possible, Colin, right across this province, because we've seen the countries that have tested more people, they've been able to slow the spread and flatten the curve.
Next question.
Next question comes from Brian Lilly from Toronto Sun. Please go ahead.
Premier, you've set up this committee for getting the economy going again. I'm just wondering, as you look at the modeling, I don't want to get into asking you to release more modeling, but as you look at modeling the plans that the health officials give you, do you have any sense of when we might be able to start loosening some restrictions on the economy? And while the economy is a very, a term that a lot of people can't relate to, these are, we're talking about people being able to feed themselves, pay their rent, pay their mortgage, look after their families. When can we start to return at least some people to a normal daily life?
Well, first of all, we aren't going to wait until this is over. We're going to start working on the economy right now, and we have to see the slow of this spread and the flattening of the curve. We need to see that start going down. Health is the #1 priority, making sure that people's health are taken care of. And once we take care of people's health, we can get the economy going. You know, Brian, I'm confident. I never want to be overconfident, but I am so confident we can get this engine going again, not because it's just the government, it's about the people. You unleash businesses, you let people move forward, and the ingenuity and the manufacturing might and the engineering might of this province is staggering. We're an economic powerhouse in North America. Don't worry about even Canada, but in North America and around the world, we're known as an economic powerhouse. And we're going to light that fire again. So I'm very, very confident we're going to get the economy back on its feet, get people back on its feet. And to give you an exact date, I just can't tell you right now until we see a change in the modeling. And to answer your other question, yes, as soon as we get more information, we have to bring it out to the public and show them the modeling. So, but we need probably a few weeks to gather a good chunk of information, and I'll go on the advice of our health team. If they feel they have enough in a couple of weeks, we'll show it in a couple of weeks. If they say a month, we'll show it in a month. But we need some information until we can do some accurate modeling.
But health officials, be it in Ontario or federally, have been just sitting and saying time and again that they are listening to what the World Health Organization says. And this is an organization that listened to what the regime in Beijing said. We now know that the people in Beijing were lying back in December, back in January, and only recently started to release real information. So are you relying on shutting down the economy, shutting down people from being able to get back to work on information that your health officials are modeling based off of bad information that came from China, where they lied to their own people, where their own people are now outraged that they were lied to?
Well, we rely on Ontario, we rely on Canada. That's what we're relying on, and we have the expertise to do our own modeling. You know, sure, we'll listen to the World Health Organizations, but again, what's happening overseas somewhere in a different country doesn't reflect what's happening here in Ontario. And it even goes as far as province to province to province. Again, we're going to be focused on Ontario, the modeling here, and that's what's going to determine when we get back to work and get the economy going again.
Next question.
Next question comes from Haley Cooper from News Talk 1010. Please go ahead.
Hi, Premier.
Hi, Haley.
Around 4,100 tests were done since yesterday. So realistically, how long will it take to reach the goal of 13,000? Will it be by this weekend? Will it be by next week?
Well, I know that they're doing everything they can to increase the testing, and we will increase. As sure as I'm standing here, we're going to increase the testing. You're going to see the numbers. We do have to give them a day or two to get ramped up, but it's all hands on deck. It's full alert. All the frontline healthcare workers, first responders, they're going to be getting tested, and we're going to do that in a rapid fashion. Because again, Haley, I'll be standing here every single day in front of you, and we're going to see the numbers. And I'm confident those numbers are going to go up, and we'll hit our target of 13,000, hopefully sooner than later. But you will see an increase from the average that we've been seeing over the last 30 days.
And my follow-up question, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has announced a plan to use smartphones as a way to enforce quarantines and make sure someone who must self-isolate is staying home. Are there any plans in Ontario to adopt a similar strategy?
Well, it's funny you asked me that. I'll be talking to Premier Kenney this afternoon. I'll ask for more details on that, and I think it sounds like a pretty good idea. But it goes back to, you know, the big brother approach. Like we have to rely on the people. The 14.5 million people all working together, being responsible, and self-isolating rather than policing them. We have great people in this province, and again, vast majority of people are listening, and we just hope and pray that they're going to listen to the protocols that the Chief Medical Officer has sent out there. But as I've always said, everything's on the table. It's not a bad idea, actually.
Next question.
Next question comes from Mike Aiken from Q104. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mike.
Good afternoon, Premier. Thanks for taking the time.
Hi.
I'm just wondering about, on a long weekend, Manitobans often come into northwestern Ontario and Sunset Country for their seasonal residences and cottages, and I'm just wondering, are there any changes on the border over the long weekend?
Well, you know, Minister Rickford, I call Minister Rickford one of the champions. He's working so hard for the folks up in Kenora, and I'll be speaking to Premier Pallister. Premier Pallister has to get that message out there, like we're getting the message out there. Don't be traveling. Don't be going to cottage country. Don't be traveling across the border into Quebec or Manitoba unless your job it relies on it, or it's essential service, or you have to go there for medical reasons. And I'll be reinforcing that message with Premier Pallister. We have a very good working relationship, all the premiers. We talk offline all the time. And we have a good group of premiers. We're all supporting each other. So I'm going to reinforce that message that please, the people from Manitoba, if you have a cottage in the Kenora region, please don't come there. Just stay at home. There's not the resources. We just do not have the resources in Kenora on so many different levels, and I know there's a tremendous amount of people from Manitoba that have their cottages there. We welcome you with open arms after we get through this. But my message doesn't change, no matter if it's Ontario or Quebec or Manitoba. Please just stay at home.
Premier, I'm just wondering, have you spoken to the Prime Minister on this? There is some suggestion that you might.
That conversation will come up today. I'll be speaking to the Prime Minister. So we have two meetings today. We have a phone conference with the Prime Minister and all the premiers, and then we also have a conference with all the premiers. So a lot of items will be discussed. But I think it should be an unwritten rule. You live in different provinces. Unless you have to, do not cross the border. It's as simple as that. Just stay in your area, and you'll be taken care of a lot better in your area than if you were to go up to, cottage country somewhere.
Okay, this will be the last question.
Last question comes from Victoria Gibson from iPolitics. Please go ahead.
Hi, my question is for Minister Elliott. Prior to this virus hitting Ontario, were there any warning signs brought to your attention that Ontario might struggle in a pandemic or outbreak situation, accessing or manufacturing things like PPE, ventilators, and testing materials like reagents?
Well, I would say that we were perhaps overly dependent on other countries to provide some of this equipment. We've since learned from that, and we have worked with Ontario companies that are doing wonderful work retooling their equipment to produce ventilators, for example. Apparel manufacturers are coming forward to make gowns and masks. Some of the distillers making hand sanitizer and so on. So as the Premier has indicated, we don't want to have to be dependent on other countries should other disasters like pandemics befall us. And this is certainly a lesson learned and something that we are going to make sure that we certainly stock up in the event of another pandemic, which I hope doesn't happen. But we need to be prepared for it, and we need to make sure that we have those Ontario resources available to us. And we are very proud of the work that Ontarians are doing in stepping up to this challenge.
And I was told by Public Health Ontario today that no provincial level simulation exercises for pandemic preparedness had been held by their agency in recent years. Although a national exercise is supposed to happen later this year, and local public health units have also done their own simulations. So I'm wondering, do you think there should have been more preparedness testing done at a provincial level before COVID-19 to look for vulnerabilities that we've seen?
Well, we certainly have preparedness in every ministry of the government that they are required to look at the situation, stress test the situation, what would happen under various different scenarios, and they would reach out to what they would do in reaching out to their agencies and so on. So certainly at the provincial level, we were prepared for that. This is something that gets reviewed annually. Different stressors are put into the mix. So we were ready for it. We anticipated, of course, that something could happen, and we are prepared for that at the provincial level.
That's great. Thank you, everyone.